Chapter 1: Foundations of Memory, the ABMC, and the Promise of Never Forgetting. After the Great War ended, America made a promise that those who gave everything on distant soil would never fade from memory. In 1923, that promise took form as the American Battle Monuments Commission, an institution born not from politics, but from reverence. Its mission was simple and sacred: to care for the graves and monuments of those who would never come home. Its guiding words became its eternal creed: time will not dim the glory of their deeds. Over the decades, that mission expanded. Today, the ABMC tends 26 cemeteries and 31 memorials across the world, from the storm-beaten cliffs of Normandy to the jungles of the Philippines. More than 140,000 American service members rest beneath its care, and nearly 100,000 more are honored on the walls of the missing, those whose remains were never found, whose graves lie somewhere beyond the reach of history. To walk among these headstones is to enter a place where time loses its urgency. Each cross, each Star of David, gleams alike in the sunlight, a symbol of equality and sacrifice. For the unknown dead, there are stones without names marked simply: "Here rests in honored glory a comrade in arms, known but to God." In every cemetery stands a chapel, a quiet shelter of stone, where maps and carvings trace the battles once fought around them. On marble walls, names are etched deep. When a lost soldier is finally found and identified, a small bronze rosette is placed beside his name, a tiny circle of closure in an ocean of loss. Some names are carved in gold. These belong to those who earned the Medal of Honor, their courage forever illuminated against the pale stone. And yet every grave, whether famous or forgotten, is honored the same: meticulously tended, perfectly aligned, and surrounded by gardens that bloom even in grief. Beyond the gates of these cemeteries, memory continues in unexpected ways. In the Netherlands, ordinary citizens have adopted the graves of American soldiers since 1945. They visit, bring flowers, write letters to families they've never met. For many, the soldier they care for has become a part of their own family, a bond born from gratitude and kept alive by love. The ABMC is more than an agency. It is a covenant. Its caretakers, past and present, are the stewards of silence, guardians of the promise that the young men and women who never returned will be remembered for as long as there are hands to tend, the grass voices to speak their names and hearts, to honor what they gave. Chapter 2: Kewaunee, a county's war, a county's memory. In the heart of Wisconsin, where Lake Michigan's wind carries the scent of pine and water, lies Kewaunee County, a patchwork of farms, small towns and families bound by hard work and faith. In the years before the Second World War, life here moved with a gentle rhythm: harvests in the fall high school games, under bright lights, Sunday gatherings after church. But in December of 1941, that rhythm changed forever. Like every small town in America, Kewaunee watched as its young men and women packed their bags, kissed their families goodbye, and stepped into history. Some enlisted willingly. Others answered the call when it came in the mail. They didn't know where they would go, only that they had to go. For the families left behind, the war arrived in headlines and telegrams. Ration books and war bonds became part of daily life. The courthouse steps filled with ceremonies and farewells. The radio carried news of battles from places few could find on a map: Guadalcanal, Normandy, the Ardennes, the Philippines. And through it all, a community learned to live with hope and fear in equal measure. Kewaunee's contribution to the war wasn't just in its people, but also in its labor. Along the lake stood the Kewaunee Shipbuilding and Engineering Company, a vital lifeline of production. Between 1941 and 1946, its workers, men and women, both built 80 vessels for the US military cargo ships, tugboats, and transport craft that would serve across the world. One ship, launched in April of 1944, carried a name then unremarkable: FP-344. It survived. The war was later converted by the Navy, and in 1967 was sent to the Pacific under a new name, USS Pueblo. In January 1968, the ship was captured by North Korea. It remains there to this day, never decommissioned, a strange living ghost of Kewaunee's wartime labour. But behind the steel and statistics are faces young men whose laughter once echoed through these streets. Their names now rest on a bronze memorial outside the courthouse, 41 sons of Kewaunee County who never came home. Each represents a story. 6 of them are the stories we now tell. Chapter 3. Joseph A. Muhofski, Pearl Harbor, Radio Man, 3rd Class. The first was named Joseph A. Muhofski. He grew up on Wisconsin Avenue, a son of Joseph and Lucy, a quiet boy with a steady nature. He graduated from Kewaunee High School in 1936, a time when the country was still clawing its way out of the Great Depression. Like many young men, he joined the Civilian Conservation Corps, working long days under open skies, learning radio operation, a skill that would shape his fate. In March of 1940, Joe enlisted in the Navy. He was 22 years old. The world was uneasy, though few yet imagined how soon the storm would break. When it did, he was already far from home, stationed aboard the USS Pennsylvania, a battleship anchored at Pearl Harbor. Sunday, December the 7th, 1941, a date that would be carved into American memory. The sun had barely risen when the first Japanese aircraft appeared over Oahu. Within minutes, the sky was filled with the roar of engines, the whistle of falling bombs, and the fire of exploding fuel tanks. Joe was at his post when the attack began. The Pennsylvania was struck, engulfed in smoke and chaos. Men shouted through the din. Alarms screamed through corridors. When the attack finally ended, the harbour was burning, and Joe Muhofski was gone. He was 23 years old, Kewaunee County's first Gold Star son of the Second World War. His body was never found. In the years that followed, his parents placed a marker for him in Holy Rosary Cemetery. His name was engraved again on their own tombstone, a quiet reminder that even those who vanished can still have a home. When the telegram came, the family hung a Gold Star service flag in their window, a tradition born in World War I. Each star a symbol of a life given in service. In Kewaunee, that single gold star was the first. It would not be the last. Joe Muhofski never saw the end of the war. He never knew who won or how history would remember Pearl Harbor. But in a sense, his sacrifice became the beginning the moment a small Wisconsin town realized the war had reached them and would take more than they could ever imagine. Chapter 4. Perry W. Drossart, The Quincy and the Pacific Night. He was born in Casco, Wisconsin, on a summer day, June 3rd, 1923. By the time he turned 17, Europe was already burning and the world was sliding toward another war. Perry enlisted in the Navy in 1940, barely old enough to shave. He was assigned to the USS Quincy, a heavy cruiser in the Pacific Fleet. In August of 1942, the Quincy was part of the first major Allied offensive against Japan, the Guadalcanal Campaign. It was a desperate, uncertain fight fought on small islands thousands of miles from home, in waters that would soon be littered with ships. On the night of August 8th, as the Quincy patrolled near Savo Island, darkness fell over the fleet. The sea was calm, and the stars hung clear above the masts. Then, without warning, Japanese destroyers struck from the black horizon. Torpedoes and shells rained across the water. The night exploded in fire. The Quincy fought bravely, its guns blazing against unseen targets. But the battle was swift and brutal. 3 torpedoes found their mark, tearing through steel. Within minutes, the ship began to list. Flames leapt across her decks. Amid the confusion and smoke, Perry Drossart disappeared into the sea. He was 19 years old. When morning came, the Pacific was quiet again, scattered wreckage oil slicks, and the faint cries of the few who survived. The Battle of Savo Island became one of the Navy's worst defeats, but the Greater War would turn. The Guadalcanal campaign ended months later in Allied victory, a turning point that began the slow push back across the Pacific. Perry's name is carved into the tablets of the missing at the Manila American Cemetery in the Philippines. Thousands of miles away in Casco, a memorial stone in Holy Trinity Cemetery bears his name. His body was never recovered, but his memory endures half a world apart, joined by stone and faith. When you read his name on that memorial wall, you can almost feel the weight of it. A young man from Wisconsin lost in a night battle so far from the world he knew now remembered in marble beneath a tropical sun. Chapter 5. Ralph F. Lietz, Jr., Coast Guard, Greenland Patrol, North Atlantic Perils. He was called Bud by those who knew him, Ralph F. Lietz, Jr., born February 16, 1922 in Kewaunee. He was tall, athletic, and full of easy charm, the kind of young man who seemed to light up a room. At Kewaunee High School, he played both football and basketball, and by his senior year, he captained the team. The local newspaper once called him the pride of Rose Street. When he graduated in 1940, the world was already tightening its grip. Europe had fallen into war, and America watched anxiously from across the ocean. That same year, Ralph enlisted in the United States Coast Guard. He was 19. His first posting was close to home, the Great Lakes. But as war came, the Coast Guard took on a new and dangerous role. The Escanaba, his ship, was a sleek 165-foot cutter assigned to the Greenland Patrol, a critical mission that stretched across the icy expanse of the North Atlantic. The sea there was merciless freezing fog, shrouded and hunted by German submarines that prowled just beneath the waves. The Escanaba's duties were both heroic and harrowing. Escorting convoys, rescuing survivors and keeping lifelines open between Greenland, Newfoundland and the mainland, the men worked in bitter cold, their decks coated in ice, their hands raw from salt and wind. Every sound, a groan in the hull, a shift in the water could mean death. On June 13, 1943, as dawn broke grey over the Atlantic, the Escanaba was sailing with convoy GS-24. At 5:10 in the morning, an explosion ripped through her hull. Whether from a torpedo or a drifting mine, no one could say for certain. The ship broke apart and sank within 3 minutes. 105 men went into the freezing water. Only 2 survived. Ralph Lietz was not among them. He was 21 years old, an only child. His name is now inscribed on the East Coast Memorial in Battery Park, New York City, among thousands who vanished beneath the sea. A memorial stone also stands for him in Riverside Cemetery in Kewaunee. The stone carries his name, beside those of his parents, a reminder that love does not end when the body cannot be found. The story of the Escanaba became one of the Coast Guard's most haunting losses, a symbol of the quiet courage of sailors who faced an invisible enemy in the loneliest waters on Earth. Ralph Lietz never saw combat in the way history books describe it, but his service was no less perilous. His war was fought against cold darkness and time itself, and he paid the same price as those who fell on the battlefield. Somewhere beneath the grey waves of the North Atlantic, the Escanaba still rests. The ocean keeps her secrets, but Kewaunee keeps her sun. Chapter 6. Milo J. Bunda Infantry, Malaria, and Heroism in New Guinea. In Kewaunee, the Bundas were known as a family of athletes. Milo J. Bunda, born June 14, 1918, was a star on the basketball court and the football field, the kind of young man whose name filled local headlines in the late 1930s. He graduated from Kewaunee High School in 1936, full of ambition and energy, but the winds of war were already stirring across the world. When he was drafted into the US Army on March 20, 1941, Milo joined a division made up mostly of men from Wisconsin and Michigan, the 32nd Infantry Division known as the Red Arrow. The name came from their symbol, a red arrow piercing through a bar, a sign that they never failed to break through enemy lines. Milo became part of the 127th Infantry Regiment, and soon he and his division were sent to one of the most brutal frontiers of the war, the jungles of New Guinea. Their heat, rain and disease were as deadly as bullets. The terrain was a living nightmare, endless mud-tangled vines and mosquitoes thick as smoke. Malaria became the invisible enemy. It struck whole units at once, soldiers shaking with fever eyes, yellowed bodies too weak to stand. Milo was hospitalized for a time, his strength sapped by the illness, but he returned to his unit. That was who he was, resilient, loyal, unwilling to leave his friends behind. On July 26, 1944, during heavy fighting in Papua New Guinea, Milo was killed in action. He was 26. Accounts from his regiment later told of his bravery, how he risked his life to help his fellow soldiers under fire. For his courage, Milo Bunda was posthumously awarded the Bronze Star, one of the Army's highest honours for heroism. He now lies beneath the palms and quiet lawns of the Manila American Cemetery in the Philippines, surrounded by thousands of his brothers in arms. The air there is heavy with tropical heat, but the ground is immaculate, cared for by hands that understand the cost of freedom. For Kewaunee, Milo's loss was deeply felt. He had been one of their own, a young man whose athletic grace became courage on a battlefield half a world away. His story is a reminder that the war in the Pacific was not just fought on beaches and ships. It was fought in places no map could fully capture, in jungles where courage was measured not by victory but by endurance. Chapter 7. Raymond Christenson, the teacher who fell from the sky. The story of Raymond Christenson begins differently. Before the war, he was not a soldier but a teacher, a quiet, thoughtful man who spent his days in classrooms in Casco, Wisconsin. He was born on December 17, 1916, and by the time he was 24, he had chosen a life of purpose, shaping young minds in the same community where he grew up. But the world was changing too quickly to stay behind a desk. Like so many others of his generation, Ray felt the pull of duty. He joined the US Army Air Forces, the newest and most dangerous branch of the service, and trained as a bombardier aboard a B-17 Flying Fortress. In November of 1942, before shipping out, he married Eunice Theory of Algoma. They wed quietly on a Friday, standing before a justice of the peace, two people full of hope, believing they would have decades ahead of them. By 1944, Ray was in Tennessee flying practice missions in preparation for overseas deployment. The work was demanding and dangerous. Even in training, the skies could turn deadly. On September 17, 1944, two B-17s collided mid-air near Brownsville, Tennessee. One of them carried Ray. In a split second, the two great planes became falling fire. Of his crew, Ray was the only one killed. The others parachuted to safety. On the second aircraft, 8 of 9 men died. The cause was later listed as died non-battle. The phrase was bureaucratic cold, but the grief it carried was just as deep. Ray was 27. His body was brought home to Evergreen Cemetery in Algoma, where he was laid to rest beneath the same Wisconsin sky he had always known. It is easy to think of war as a story of front lines of combat and enemy fire, but for every soldier lost in battle, another died in training and transport in the quiet preparation that made victory possible. In the Army Air Forces alone, over 15,000 men were killed in non-combat circumstances. Each was a life spent in service, even if fate claimed it before the fight began. Raymond Christenson's story is one of quiet devotion, a man who traded the chalkboard for the cockpit, whose courage lay in doing what was needed, not what was easy. His death, like so many others, was not witnessed by history, but it was felt by a wife, a family and a community that never forgot the teacher who fell from the sky. Chapter 8. Arnold Malvitz, Tank Destroyers, Aachen and the Dutch Who Remember. The last of the 6 stories belongs to Arnold Malvitz, a quiet farm boy whose life stretched from the fields of Wisconsin to the shattered villages of wartime Germany. Arnold was born on December 3, 1921 in Door County, but his family later moved to Luxembourg in Kewaunee County. He was one of 6 children, and by 20 he was working on a neighbour's farm, his hands hardened by labour, and his future as uncertain as the times. When the draft came in 1942, Arnold answered without hesitation. He enlisted in the United States Army on October 20th of that year. Before leaving, he married Harriet Siegman of Door County. It was April 10th, 1943, a brief moment of joy before the long separation of war. They would have one son before he shipped out, and another who would be born after his death, a child he would never meet. Arnold was assigned to Company B of the 638th Tank Destroyer Battalion, part of an experimental unit designed to hunt down and destroy German armour. The men of the tank destroyers fought in fast, lightly armoured vehicles with large guns but little protection. They were exposed, constantly moving, and often among the first to meet the enemy. By late 1944, the 638th had crossed France and was pushing into Germany. The air was cold, the ground frozen, and the enemy desperate. Near the small German town of Guinea, northeast of Aachen, Arnold's unit came under fire. On December 1st, just 2 days before his 23rd birthday, Arnold Malvitz was killed in action. He left behind a wife, a child, and another on the way. Arnold now rests in the Netherlands American Cemetery, where row after row of white crosses stretches beneath the Dutch sky. There, the people of the Netherlands have carried out a quiet act of devotion since 1945. A grave adoption program. Families and individuals adopt the graves of American soldiers, visiting them, caring for them, and bringing flowers on holidays and anniversaries. Many even seek out the soldiers' families, writing letters, sharing photographs, and learning the stories behind the names they tend. The program has lasted generations. There is still a waiting list today, so many people hoping to care for the memory of a man they never met. It is a bond of gratitude that time has only deepened. Arnold's grave may belong to one of those families. Somewhere in the Netherlands, someone may stand before his cross each year, whisper his name, and thank him, a farmer's son from Wisconsin who helped liberate their home. In that way, Arnold Malvitz did not die forgotten. His story crossed oceans and his name lives on, not only in Kewaunee County, but in the hearts of strangers who refuse to let him fade. Chapter 9. Threads of Memory, Collective Portraits and Reflections. 6 men, 6 lives that began in the same county, in the same schools, the same streets, under the same sky, and ended in 6 different corners of the world. Joseph Muhofski died in the fires of Pearl Harbor before the war had truly begun. Perry Drossart was lost at sea in the Battle of Savo Island, swallowed by the dark waters of the Pacific. Ralph Lietz vanished in the freezing Atlantic aboard the Escanaba, his ship gone in minutes. Milo Bunda fell in the jungles of New Guinea, a soldier who gave his life trying to save others. Raymond Christenson perished in the skies above Tennessee. A teacher turned bombardier, killed before he ever reached the front. And Arnold Malvitz died in the cold mud of Germany as Allied forces closed in on victory. 6 stories. 6 paths that began in one quiet Midwestern county and spread out across the map of the Second World War, like the lines of a web Pacific Atlantic jungle sky battlefield. Together they form a portrait of the war itself, ordinary lives caught up in extraordinary times. When the war ended, their families and thousands like them were left to make sense of absence. Some had graves they could visit. Others had only names etched in stone on memorial walls, oceans away. But in every home, in every small town, the loss was the same. A silence at the dinner table, a photograph on the mantel, a letter folded and refolded until it began to fade. Kewaunee County sent more than 400 men and women into the armed forces during the war. 41 of them never came back. Their names are carved on the courthouse memorial, each one a chapter of a larger story written in sacrifice. Across Wisconsin, more than 320,000 men and women served. Over 8,000 were killed. Nationwide, the total climbed beyond 400,000. Each number represents a face, a person who once walked down a quiet American street and then disappeared into history. It is easy to speak of numbers, but numbers have no heartbeat. The ABMC reminds us that remembrance must be personal. When we read a name on a cross, a star, or a wall, we are not reading history. We are meeting someone who once lived, someone who laughed, dreamed, and believed in tomorrow. The men of Kewaunee never saw victory parades or peace treaties. They died believing only in the duty before them, and because of that, the world they left behind endured. Chapter 10. How to Walk Among the Stones, Visiting Reflection and Remembrance. There is a certain hush that falls when you enter one of the American Battle Monuments Commission cemeteries. The air itself seems different, lighter, yet heavy with meaning. The grass is perfect, the pathways clean, the symmetry so precise that it feels like time itself has aligned to honor the fallen. Walk between the rows, and you can almost feel the stories beneath your feet. Each headstone bears the same white marble face, but everyone is different. A single name, a rank, a date, a state. Together, they form a choir of silence, a song of remembrance that needs no words. Some visitors come to find a relative, others come simply to understand. Many arrive as tourists and leave as pilgrims. They stop before the wall of the missing, running their fingers over names carved into stone names that have waited decades for someone to remember them. In some places, you'll notice a small rosette beside a name. That mark means the soldier's body was finally found, their story given closure after so many years. In France, the cemeteries lie near the beaches where freedom was reclaimed. In Italy, they rest on quiet hills overlooking valleys once scarred by war. In the Philippines, the graves stretch in sweeping circles across the grass, surrounded by palm trees and sunlight. And in the Netherlands, where gratitude lives on in the hearts of generations, flowers bloom on American graves every day of the year. These places are not just cemeteries. They are classrooms of history, sanctuaries of peace, and reminders of what can be lost when the world forgets its lessons. To walk among the stones is to stand at the meeting point of past and present. Each cross, each star, each inscription is a message written across time. Remember me. Tell my story. Let my sacrifice mean something. And so we walk, we pause, we remember, because remembrance is not a duty, it is a privilege. Chapter 11. The Promise That Time Will Not Dim. The story of Kewaunee County is in many ways the story of America itself. Ordinary people rising to meet extraordinary times. They were farmers, teachers, laborers, sons and fathers. They had plans and dreams, and they gave them up for something larger than themselves. Their lives ended far from home, but their names endure in local memorials, in distant cemeteries, and in the quiet care of the American Battle Monuments Commission. Nearly a century after its founding, the ABMC still keeps its promise. Its gardeners trim the hedges, its caretakers polish the marble, and its staff greet visitors with reverence. The cemeteries remain immaculate not because they must, but because the fallen deserve nothing less. The motto carved into the heart of the Commission still speaks as clearly now as it did in 1923. Time will not dim the glory of their deeds. And in Kewaunee, that promise lives on in the courthouse memorial, in family stories passed quietly through generations, and in the unseen connection between a small Wisconsin town and the great solemn fields of Europe and the Pacific. For when we remember them, when we speak their names and tell their stories, they are not lost to time. They live again in the rhythm of our voices, in the memory of the land that raised them, and in the freedom their sacrifice secured. The fields are quiet now. The war is long over. But beneath the white stones, the story remains written not in ink, but in devotion. Time has not dimmed it, and it never will.